The first time I stepped aboard the USS Winston Churchill, I thought I understood life at sea, but the weeks that followed revealed just how little I truly knew. The ship, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, was alive in ways no training manual could ever explain, and for sailors permanently assigned, it felt less like a vessel and more like a floating prison, narrow corridors weaving like a labyrinth and engines humming in a constant, ominous rhythm beneath your feet. Yet the strangest and most unnerving part was not the physical claustrophobia or the intermittent blackouts that left air conditioning and lights dead, nor the water rationing forcing short, cold showers, but the sense of unseen eyes tracking you as you moved through the dimly lit passageways, a sensation that gnawed at the edge of your mind, leaving goosebumps and an inexplicable dread. As a relatively new petty officer tasked with damage control duties, I was assigned to test the emergency lighting during one such blackout, and while it seemed like a simple task, walking from compartment to compartment and pushing buttons, I found myself approaching Auxiliary Room 2, a place shrouded in rumors that had circulated among the crew, whispers of experiences that were curiously gendered. Female sailors feeling they were being watched, males sensing imminent attacks, tales I had dismissed until the moment I stepped onto the cold steel deck, feeling the air change instantly, as if I had crossed into a separate, hostile dimension, my stomach twisting and a chill crawling up my spine. My fellow engineers, initially willing to accompany me, froze midway and refused to descend further, their fear palpable, leaving me to navigate the darkness alone with only a flashlight, the blackness pressing against me like liquid, every shadow a potential threat. And then the impossible began. The machinery creaked, banged, and word though the main power was offline. Emergency lights flickering on and off as a voice, clear and frantic, screamed, "Get out! Get out! Get out!" repeatedly, echoing through the compartment in a language familiar yet terrifyingly distorted, forcing a hasty retreat that left my heart pounding. Afterward, the eerie feeling persisted as stories of the previous year's tragic refugee rescue surfaced, the memory of panicked men and women, some pushed overboard in desperation, bodies stored above the very room I had just fled, mingling with the palpable energy of lingering spirits, leaving me to question whether the haunting was born from death, fear, or the ship itself, a vessel saturated with memories too heavy to bear. And though I completed my duties, the shadow of Auxiliary Room 2 never left me, the corridors now haunted in my mind as much as in reality. The Churchill no longer just a ship, but a repository of grief, dread, and whispers that refused to be ignored, a reminder that even in the most disciplined, regimented environment, the unseen could command respect, and the boundary between the living and the dead, the known and the unknown, was thinner than any steel hull could ever suggest. The days aboard the USS Winston Churchill blurred together, each one bringing new routines, but also a lingering sense of unease. And though the ship roared with engines and the clatter of sailors performing their duties, there were moments when the hull seemed to breathe, exhaling a cold, metallic scent that carried faint whispers no one else acknowledged. My initial assignment to test the emergency lighting had left me on edge, and now every corner, hatch, and ladder well seemed to pulse with silent warnings, especially around Auxiliary Room 2, which had quickly earned a reputation among the crew as the domain of the inexplicable. And while I had returned to my regular duties, the stories continued to circulate, each one adding weight to the ship's invisible history of sorrow, fear, and unanswered questions, including a flight deck night check where two of my colleagues described a hatch swinging open as if pushed by unseen hands, though no one had approached it. The sounds of footsteps echoing over the metal deck, and faint rotor-like noises carried across the pitch-black expanse, unsettling even the most seasoned sailors. I began paying closer attention, noting the cadence of mechanical hums that sometimes seemed to sync with the irregular thumps of my own heartbeat. And though logical explanations suggested drafts, shifting machinery, or the play of wind against the superstructure, my instincts screamed otherwise. especially when moments of silence on the ship would suddenly be pierced by creaks, bangs, and faint voices that seemed to rise from the depths of the hull. Voices that mimicked normal speech but held no coherent words, as if trying to communicate through some otherworldly interference, reminiscent of the distorted radio chatter used in long-range communication, yet far too localized, too immediate to dismiss as mere signal anomalies. One night, tasked with routine patrol in the dimly lit passageways aft, I witnessed the impossible. Red lights casting a blood-tinged glow along the corridor, hatches opening and closing in rhythm with a pulse that could not be my own, and glimpses of motion through portholes that revealed nothing but blackness, though the feeling of being watched was undeniable, paralyzing, forcing me to halt in my tracks, the hairs on my neck standing rigid, eyes darting to every reflective surface, searching for the source of a presence I could neither see nor fully comprehend. And yet I could sense it, lingering just beyond the reach of light, as if the hull itself had absorbed the collective fear and anguish of all who had ever served aboard. Stories from other sailors, from both the U.S. Navy and international allies, began to coalesce, tales of flight deck patrols interrupted by inexplicable noises, of solitary mess halls haunted by the ghostly figure of an old sailor smoking a pipe, vanishing when approached, of voices picked up on radio frequencies that should have been silent, and through these shared experiences a pattern emerged. Ships, especially older destroyers like ours, seemed to retain the echoes of tragedy, the collective memory of lives lost in sudden capsizes, botched rescues, and unseen accidents, all folded into the steel and circuitry, waiting for a moment, a spark of attention, to manifest. And as I navigated the dimly lit corridors, flashlight trembling in my hand, I realized the line between past and present had blurred, the Churchill becoming a vessel, not only for the living but for the stories, grievances, and restless spirits of those who had suffered aboard her. And with every step, every shadowed corner, every hatch that creaked open unbidden, the lesson became clear. To serve on such a ship was to confront the living history embedded in its bones, to recognize that fear, memory, and perhaps something beyond comprehension could exist simultaneously with the routines of a disciplined naval life, and no amount of steel, training, or procedure could shield one from the whispers echoing from the hull, the uninvited reminders that some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. The haunting of Auxiliary Room 2 was no longer a whispered legend among the crew. It had become an unspoken truth that hovered over every sailor. And as I descended further into the ship's labyrinthine compartments, I felt the weight of the past pressing down, thick and suffocating, the metallic walls of the Churchill seeming to absorb every footstep and echo it back with a ghostly resonance. And one night, while performing routine checks near the refrigeration units where the bodies of refugees had once been stored after a tragic failed rescue, I felt a chill so intense it was as though the temperature had dropped decades in seconds, freezing the air around me, my breath crystallizing in the dim light of my flashlight. And yet the cold was more than physical. It carried the despair, panic, and final moments of lives lost, imprinted into the very bulkheads. A silent testament to human tragedy that refused to be ignored. Navigating the narrow catwalks above the auxiliary room, I could hear the faintest creaks, like whispered footsteps in rhythm with my own, and shadows flickered at the edges of vision, forming shapes that seemed almost human, yet melted away when confronted. And though I attempted to rationalize, attributing the sounds to settling steel or distant machinery, the inexplicable banging, like fists striking the hull from within, and the sudden, urgent cries that I could swear were voices shouting, "Get out!" echoed too vividly to be mere imagination, the repetition carving fear into my mind. Later, speaking with colleagues who had braved these areas during night checks, they recounted similar encounters, doors swinging open without wind, hatches unlatching in dead silence, and the eerie feeling of eyes tracking every movement, the cumulative weight of such experiences forming an almost palpable presence that seemed to ripple through the ship's core. And while some shrugged it off as stress, long hours, or fatigue, others acknowledged quietly, and with reverence, that the Churchill was different, a vessel that remembered, that mourned, that warned, and, as a petty officer, I began documenting these incidents with meticulous detail, my logbooks filling with accounts that blurred the line between operational anomalies and paranormal events, noting times, locations, ambient temperatures, and the emotional state of all present, attempting to find patterns, yet finding none that could satisfy a rational explanation, even the communication. Systems seemed affected, radios picking up distorted voices in languages unrecognizable, rhythmic patterns that mimicked speech yet carried no meaning, sometimes over hours, sometimes seconds, and each occurrence left a cold residue in the mind, a creeping doubt that perhaps the stories of Auxiliary Room 2 were not mere superstition, but evidence of residual energy, grief, and terror imprinted upon the vessel, amplified by the isolation of life at sea. During one patrol, I witnessed two sailors on the flight deck react to an unseen force. The hatch before them swung wide as if a hand had pushed it, but the deck was empty, the wind calm, machinery silent, and the supernatural suggestion was undeniable. And in the mess hall, tales persisted of spectral figures sitting silently, pipe smoke curling in empty air, vanishing upon approach, a reminder that the past never truly leaves, and that each corridor, ladder, and engine room of the Churchill was a palimpsest of memory, trauma, and unfinished stories. And as I patrolled the ship in darkness, flashlight illuminating cold, reflective steel, I realized that the sea itself might be a conduit, a medium through which past and present intertwined, and that the USS Winston Churchill, for all its modernity and armaments, remained haunted by its human cargo, by moments of courage, tragedy, and fear that could not, and would not, be erased, leaving those of us aboard to navigate both the known dangers of the ocean and the unseen. Insidious presence lurking in the silent, frozen corners of its hull. The deeper I ventured into the USS Winston Churchill, the more the ordinary routines of ship life seemed to fade, replaced by a sensation that the vessel itself was aware of my presence, listening and responding with subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in air pressure, the faint hum of dormant machinery, and the occasional creak that sounded far too deliberate to be dismissed as normal wear. And while I had grown accustomed to the ship's rhythms during the day, the nights were something else. Entirely tasked with night inspections, flashlight in hand, I moved through passages where the red glow of emergency lighting barely penetrated the darkness, and every sound, from a distant pipe rattle to a footstep echoing off steel walls, felt amplified, charged with an uncanny significance. And as I approached areas rumored to be haunted, Auxiliary Room 2 and the adjacent decks, the air grew thick, almost viscous, pressing against my lungs and carrying with it the faint, unmistakable whispers of voices that did not belong to any of the crew, speaking in patterns that mimicked human language but conveyed a sense of warning, urgency, and sorrow simultaneously. And though rational explanations tried to insist it was interference from long-range communications or the settling of steel, the emotional weight embedded in those sounds was undeniable, clawing at the edges of my mind. One night on the flight deck, while walking the pitch-black expanse with a colleague, a hatch swung, open mere inches from us, and though no one was there, the sound resonated with a hollow, deliberate thump that made our hearts race. The wind impossible, the machinery silent, and when we called out, no response came, only the echo of our own fear bouncing back. And yet we both knew we were not alone. The feeling of being observed and tested by an unseen intelligence pressing down on us like a tangible force. The shadows around us stretching and twisting in impossible ways, shapes forming in the corner of the eye and vanishing when looked at directly, forcing us to quicken our pace back to the lit areas of the ship. In the mess hall, another sailor recounted seeing a figure seated silently, pipe smoke curling into the air despite the absence of a living occupant, vanishing the moment it was approached, leaving a residue of cold dread in the room. and similar reports poured in from other sailors stationed on different decks. Footsteps pacing behind locked doors, hatches opening and closing by themselves, and distorted voices picked up on long-range radio frequencies that seemed to respond to their own speech, as if the ship's history and the tragedies it had witnessed were attempting to communicate through fragmented, eerie signals, each event leaving an indelible mark on the psyche of those present. My own experiences compounded the legend, from the moment I descended into Auxiliary Room 2 during a blackout, feeling the air itself recoil, to hearing the machinery crank, when no power should exist, to the voice screaming at me to leave, all of it intensified by the knowledge of the human suffering that had once occurred in these very compartments, bodies stored above, refugees drowning in the Gulf of Aden, their panic echoing in the very steel beneath my feet, and I realized that the Churchill was not merely a ship, but a living chronicle of human experience, trauma, and memory. A vessel haunted not by random specters, but by the concentrated residue of fear, death, and desperation. And navigating her halls demanded a constant awareness, a recognition that even in the most disciplined environment, some forces, emotional, psychic, perhaps even supernatural, cannot be contained, leaving those of us aboard to contend with the unknown, to respect the invisible, and to survive the unspoken test of courage that comes with walking the corridors where the past refuses to rest. Life aboard the USS Winston Churchill had become a delicate balance between routine and dread, a constant negotiation with the unseen forces that seemed to linger in every corner of the ship, and it was during my night watches that the distinction between the living and the spectral blurred, the steel walls and engine hum serving as both shield and conduit for experiences that defied explanation. For as I walked the narrow passageways with a flashlight trembling in my grip, I could feel the residue of past tragedies pressing against me. Subtle but undeniable, a cold weight on the back of my neck, and the prickling sensation of being observed by eyes that had never seen daylight. The stories of Auxiliary Room 2 had circulated long before my assignment. Tales of female sailors feeling watched, male sailors sensing imminent threat, and those of us brave or foolish enough to venture near the area reported strange machinery, sounds during blackouts, doors latching and unlatching on their own, and a voice screaming, "Get out," in a tone that was simultaneously commanding and mournful, a sound that seemed to carry both human and otherworldly qualities, embedding itself in the memory and refusing to leave. And as I recounted my own experiences to colleagues, their wide-eyed expressions confirmed what I feared. This was not imagination, fatigue, or simple superstition. The ship itself had absorbed the echoes of human suffering, and perhaps the anger and panic of those who had died under tragic circumstances, including the refugees rescued and lost during the Gulf of Aden incident, whose bodies had been stored directly above the auxiliary compartment, a fact that made the strange noises and sudden chills far more personal and tangible. A reminder that death, especially violent or fearful death, leaves a mark that steel cannot erase, and the Churchill, like any old warship, remembered in ways the human mind struggles to comprehend. On the flight deck during a routine patrol, I witnessed hatches swing open as if pushed by invisible hands, the eerie alignment of shadows and flickering red lights creating illusions that were almost too real to dismiss, while the sound of footsteps echoed in unoccupied passageways and faint, distorted voices drifted through long-range communication channels, repeating fragments of words and phrases that hinted at intelligible speech yet remained incomprehensible, suggesting that even technology was a conduit for the memories embedded in the ship, amplifying rather than masking them. And I began to document everything with a meticulous hand, noting times, locations, environmental conditions, and emotional states, searching for a pattern that might explain what rationality could not. The mess hall became another stage for the inexplicable, with reports of spectral figures smoking silently in corners, vanishing the instant they were approached, leaving behind only a cold presence that lingered like smoke in the mind. And the cumulative weight of these events created a new reality aboard the Churchill, one where the living had to navigate not only the ordinary dangers of the sea, but also the residue of the dead, whose energies were intertwined with every steel girder, every hatch, every engine room. And as I moved through these spaces, flashlight cutting through shadows, I felt the past and present intertwining, a dense web of fear, memory, and perhaps something more, leaving no room for disbelief, for the evidence was not in stories alone, but in the undeniable sensation of being watched, followed, and challenged by forces beyond human comprehension. And by the end of my watch, as the ship creaked and groaned under the weight of the ocean, I understood that life aboard the Winston Churchill demanded not only skill and courage, but a respect for the unseen, the echoes of the lost, and the reminders that in some places, history never rests, and neither does the presence it leaves behind. By the time my final weeks aboard the USS Winston Churchill arrived, I had come to understand that this ship was unlike any other I'd served on, a living chronicle of the past, haunted not only by tragedy, but by the very memories embedded into its steel and circuits. And each night patrol, each descent into the bowels of the vessel, reinforced that understanding, as the air itself seemed to hum with history, carrying whispers, footsteps, and the faintest flickers of movement that no one else could see, yet everyone instinctively felt. Auxiliary Room 2 remained the epicenter of this eerie reality, a place where emergency lights flickered with a life of their own, hatches opened in defiance of logic, and voices, sometimes angry, sometimes mournful, sometimes simply commanding, echoed from the darkness with such clarity that reason struggled to deny their presence. And though rational explanations were offered, mechanical failure, drafts, or the fatigue of long shifts at sea, my experiences, combined with countless testimonies from my shipmates, both American and international, suggested something far more profound, a residue of emotion, fear, and unresolved human experience that had taken root in the vessel itself. I remember one particular patrol on the flight deck during a blackout, the ocean stretching endlessly in darkness, the aircraft secured forward, leaving an abyss behind. And in that void, faint voices seemed to rise with the wind, a rotor-like hum, accompanying them, so subtle yet so distinct that my companion and I froze, scanning the deck for signs of life, only to find it empty, the sounds fading as abruptly as they had appeared, leaving a cold silence that pressed against our chests and lingered in our minds long after we returned inside, hearts still racing. Inside the mess hall, old tales persisted. Spectral sailors, a figure with a pipe vanishing when approached, footsteps pacing where no living person remained, and each occurrence reinforced the unspoken understanding among the crew that the Winston Churchill remembered, that it carried the sorrow, panic, and unfinished stories of those who had served aboard and those who had perished. The refugees lost during the Gulf of Aden rescue incident being perhaps the most potent imprint, their fear and struggles seemingly etched into the compartments above Auxiliary Room 2, influencing air, sound, and perception in ways that defied modern science. As I moved through the passageways, flashlight trembling, documenting anomalies, I realized that the ship's history was not merely in logs or photographs, but alive, interacting with the living in subtle, sometimes terrifying ways, and that acknowledging its presence was not a matter of superstition, but survival. For those who ignored the signs found themselves unnerved, hesitant, and increasingly aware that the Churchill had its own rhythm, its own consciousness, shaped by the cumulative experiences of countless souls, living and dead, and that the line between what was tangible and what was spectral was thin, flexible, and easily crossed. My final nights on patrol were filled with heightened awareness, every shadow a potential reminder, every creak a message, and yet there was a strange comfort in recognizing that the ship's memory was both a warning and a guide, an unspoken covenant that demanded respect, courage, and vigilance. For the Churchill would endure, long after any individual sailor had departed, its steel walls forever inscribed with echoes of loss, bravery, and the unseen forces that linger when human history collides with isolation, fear, and the inexorable presence of the unknown. And as I stepped off the gangway for the last time, I knew that no matter where I served next, no other vessel would ever carry the same weight, the same haunting, the same living memory. For the Winston Churchill was not just a ship. It was a repository of lives, a sentinel of tragedy, and a ghostly reminder that some stories never truly end.